I think every human being starts out as an artist, right? We're all artists when we're little kids. But then at a certain point, you know, there's that kid in the class who just draws better than the other kids. I was just the kid that was always drawing, and I would give my drawings to other kids, and it was a way to make friends, you know? And I could draw anything. I could draw Spider-Man or Snoopy or whatever a kid asked me to draw, I could do it. I could draw Barbie, I could draw, you know, whatever. So all my friends were collecting my drawings. Even now I go back to my hometown and see old friends, and people will tell me, you know, those drawings you gave me, I still have them under my bed. Or when I was a little kid, if you asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would have said, I want to be either a monster maker for the movies or an astronaut. That's what I used to tell people. You know, in a scary movie, there's a lot of special effects and things that have to be made. And that's always what I was interested in. When I was a little kid, I loved those how-to, or the making of films, like the making of The American Werewolf in London. I love that almost as much as I love the movie, maybe more even. When I was in high school, my parents were worried about me because there was probably my full junior year, I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre in my room every single day. And my parents were just like, what are you doing, you know? And it was just screaming, you know, like constantly coming out of my bedroom. But I couldn't have explained it then, what I was doing, but what I was doing was I was trying to figure out how did they make this? You know, there wasn't a school for it as far as I knew. I saw Martin Scorsese's film, Life Lessons. It's one of a segment in the anthology film, New York Stories. And it's Nick Nolte playing a painter. And the paintings in the film were made by a guy named Chuck Conley. And I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. So I went to art school. And when I was in art school in 1995, when Jurassic Park came out, 94, 95, and there was a great interview with Phil Tippett. I think it was in Fangoria magazine, maybe. And Phil Tippett is saying, I'm a dinosaur. I'm going to go extinct. You know, my way of doing things is it's all going to go into the computer. And I was just like, oh gosh, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to spend my life working in a computer. So I was at art school. I was at this great art school in Chicago, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, falling in love with painting at the same time. So my interest just drifted into painting naturally. But my love of horror films has always been, you know, it has informed everything about what I do. I got married very young, and we had a baby right off the bat, and not by accident. It was intentional. So I'm in college, and I had a baby. You know, nobody else, none of my peers in college had children, babies. You know, I was the only one as far as I know. But my life was full of toys. You know, I'm like 20, 21 years old. I have a child, apartment full of toys in Chicago. And I still felt very close to my toys from when I was a kid. I had all those Star Wars toys and the big Godzilla and Showdown Warriors. I still loved all that stuff when I was in college. And my connection to those toys was visual, you know? Like, toys are so cool, like, just visually. So then I got into graduate school on the strength of these paintings of toys. But by the time I got there, I was in a state of crisis because I didn't want to paint the toys anymore. So I didn't have a motif. I didn't know what to paint. And my son was 6 years old that year. So we went to the Halloween store on 4th Avenue and like 12th Street, whatever that is, Halloween Adventure. And he picked the werewolf mask. He wanted the mask and the gloves. And I was like, cool, I'll buy a werewolf mask and gloves too. So we'll go out as father and son wolfmen, you know, on Halloween in New Haven. So we got these wolfman masks and the gloves and everything. And Halloween night, we went out as father and son wolfmen. All right, so now I've got this wolfman mask in my studio, my mask in my studio. I got a mirror, you know, and I put it on the wall, and I put that werewolf mask on, and I decided I'm gonna look in the mirror, and I'm gonna make this painting as fast as I can make it. The rule is I can't take this mask off until the painting is finished, right? Put the mask on, blank canvas on the wall, and make this painting, and take the mask off. And it's this amazing thing that I never could have made without that mask, you know? Like, putting on the mask made me some behave differently, made me feel differently, made me paint differently, made me use color differently. So after that, I kept exploring that idea of the werewolf. And it just got more and more intense. From 1998 to about 2014, it was all about the werewolf. And processing this idea of transformation and time and and the specificity of a person. Some of my friends have called me a method painter. It is like method acting. I got a job at Pearl Paint on Canal Street. It's not there anymore, it's since closed, but I was working in the canvas department. And I was talking to somebody one day about life lessons with Nick Nolte as a painter. And they were like, that guy, Chuck Connelly, has an exhibition up right now, and it's like 3 blocks from here. I'm like, whoa, really? So on my lunch break, I walked over and looked at it, and I was knocked out. So I'm like 22 years old with an apartment I can't afford, living in New York City, and making minimum wage at the art supply store. And I took out a credit card with a $5,000 limit, and I bought a painting from the gallery for $5,000. I bought a Chuck Connelly painting. So he's the author of Searching for Bobby Fischer, but he also wrote a book called Deepwater Blues. So Fred had this idea that he and I should make a book together. He said, come on, man, we'll go down to the Bahamas, we'll go fishing, we'll go on several trips. I'll interview people and look for a story, and you just make drawings, and we'll make a book out of it. When I was working on my problem for how to draw on a crazy boat, like in the high seas with rain and wind, I came up with an idea to make this board. Is if I'm on the boat and I want to make a drawing of somebody on the boat, while we're like in the ocean, I can kind of ride the boat, I can grab the side, and I can just keep drawing, see? So I'm fighting with this tuna, like trying to get it into the boat. And as I'm reeling it in, suddenly it's like I hit a bus, like I just hit a wall, like boom, like it just gets really hard, like the tuna must have got hung up on something. And he's up there in the pilot's chair, 1 level up. So he's yelling down, "You got a shark!" I'm like, "What? You got a shark!" And then boom, it gets really easy. So I reel the thing in, and it comes in, and it's just the tuna's head. And Fred's like, "Throw it back, man." And I was like, "No, man, I'm not gonna throw it back. I'm gonna draw it. This is beautiful, So I threw it in the cooler, and I go out on the dock under a full moon, and I take this tuna head, this shredded tuna head, out of the cooler, and I put it on the slats of the dock, and I sit on a 5-gallon bucket upside down, and I made this drawing. So as I'm drawing the tuna head, I can see the sharks circling between the slats, in the full moon light. It was the most amazing thing. So then I just kick the tuna head off, and it goes into the water, and one of the sharks gulps the tuna head. I moved into this place, and it was the first July that I lived here. I went to Veselka on the Lower East Side for lunch. Yeah. And then I went to the movie theater on 12th Street and 2nd Avenue for air conditioning at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a sweltering hot day. I was like, just buy a ticket, whatever's playing. And it was Habit, Larry's first movie.
You're kidding,
so
wow.
I bought a ticket, and I go in, for the AC, and I was the only person in the theater, and I watched Habit, and I loved that movie. It was the most incredible. So after that, I was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And then jump to 2003, like 4 years later, same scenario. I go to Veselka for lunch, July, hot day, go back to that same theater and I buy a ticket, and it's Margarita Happy Hour.
Oh, interesting.
Have you seen that film?
Yeah, Ilya Chaikin's movie.
Yeah, Ilya Chaikin's
yeah.
great movie. And he's the star of that film. Like he's the main character. So I'm like, oh my God, there's this guy again. Who is this guy? Larry Fessenden. Wow. So I came home and looked him up on the internet, and then I sent an email to Eye Pix, info@GlassEyePix, to Larry, and then I didn't hear from him until 2019. So like I don't know how many years later that is. I can't remember if I sent him a second email later. I might have at some point. But somehow, I guess I emailed him and asked him, like, Larry, I would love to work with you. I would love to paint you, So then one day I got an email from him saying, hey man, if you're still up for doing a portrait, I have some free time. And I responded right away, yeah, when are you available? So he came and sat on that couch.
Really?
In November 2019, and I made a painting of him in one session. And I started pulling out some of the werewolf paintings and showing them to him. And that's how we got started working on this project together.
And then July 2020, Anki and I had gone up to Vermont. COVID was happening, and Brooklyn was intense. So Anki and I rented a beautiful cabin up in Vermont. We were up there, and you called and told me that you were working on a werewolf script about a painter who turns into a werewolf, and asked if I'd like to help you with this film by making the paintings that the painter makes. And during that conversation, I told you that I was in Vermont, and you said, "Oh, perfect, dude." So while I was in Vermont, I started working on those drawings of trees and looking for exciting nature motifs. That title drawing in the film is a drawing that I made in Vermont, in Rupert, Vermont. There's a tree line, and it looks like a tunnel of trees to this tunnel of light. And using long bamboo pins that I make, I would dip them in the ink, and I made that drawing looking at that. And then that became the title drawing. Since I was a kid, I've always loved Altered States. I mean, that's always been one of my favorite movies. It's on regular rotation in the studio. I frequently play it on my studio TV while I have sitters and just let it roll on mute for weeks at a time. And I love that film. So having Alex Hurt come into my space was like, wow, it's so crazy, you know? And then he was so gracious, and that day with you and Alex in the studio working on that portrait, it was fun to have you come in and say, and kind of direct the process. You know, we need it to look like a self-portrait, and we want pathos. And I thought, okay, how are we gonna do that, you know? And we took a break, and we were in the kitchen, and I asked him to tell me the story of the last days of his father's life. And he told me that it was a very poignant story that he told me. And part of that story was that an Umatilla Native American chief who was friends with William Hurt had come to pay his respects the day before he died. And Alex said he could have been the king of any place, any time. This guy is so majestic and so noble. And he said he came into my dad's room and sang a song to my father in his native language, in Umatilla. And it just so happened that 2 weeks before that, I had been at Academy Records on 18th Street in Manhattan, and I was going through the record bins, and they had an Umatilla vinyl record, and I bought it. So after Alex told me the story of his father, we came in, and he got back up on the model stand, and I put that record on. And I also put a mirror facing him so that I was only looking at his eyes. And he was looking at the mirror into his own eyes. And we were listening to this beautiful Umatilla Indian record. And it was very emotional. And I think that whole painting happened in that hour. So when I moved to New York, I started going to the Prince and Drawing Study Room at the Met on Fridays. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys have ever done it, but it's such an incredible, it's like one of my favorite things in New York City, and it's totally free. Just call the study room and say, I'd like to have an appointment in 2 weeks, and I want to look at a Gwen John drawing, and I'd like to look at an Albrecht Dürer etching, and engraving, and a Rembrandt etching, you know? So this whole book is I'm just filling this whole book full of drawings from an etching that Rembrandt made of a woman at her bath with a man's hat. So this lady sitting naked on a chair, presumably after a bath or before a bath, and there's a man's hat on a chair here. And I think it's such a beautiful etching. So for over a year now, I go on Fridays and draw from that etching in this book. And all of the drawings in this book are from that same etching. And then I put the ticket that they give you that you have to wear on your shirt, I just put it in my book at the end of the day, so I remember what days I was there for that drawing.
fill these books and send them to my mom at the end of the year every year. I've been doing it since 1991. They're like letters to my mom. She has a huge library of all these drawing books. Like 15,000 drawings or something. And I kept working on it. And then I ran out of room, so I had to cut the page out of the book and cut another page, a blank page, and glue it all down to a piece of watercolor paper so it would make it bigger. So you can see there are 3 parts and continue. So it took 15 years for me to make that drawing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So this one is Albrecht Dürer's Melancholia. And you can see the magic square here of 1 through 16. The Mensula Jovis, the ancient Roman planetary seal of Jupiter. Saturn is the god of gods. And he has a dream that one of his children will replace him as the god of gods when he grows up. So as a result, Saturn decides to eat the children as they're being born. So as Rhea is giving birth to these infants, Saturn is eating them. But then Rhea tricks him into eating a stone instead of the last baby that's born, which is Jupiter or Zeus. And then Jupiter grows up and fulfills the prophecy of coming back and confronting his father.
His mother gives Jupiter a potion that he mixes into Saturn's drink, which makes Saturn vomit up the stone and then vomit up his fully grown brothers and sisters.
And then Jupiter casts Saturn off of Mount Olympus down to Earth. And he says, for the rest of eternity, you shall wander the earth as a little old, powerless man. So that's who Saturn is. So he's the god of winter time. He's the god of the time of dying. He's the god of dry things. He's the god of trees with no leaves. You know, and Larry is obsessed with bare branches. Saturn is the god of bare branches. And I was just crying, and I stood up and took off my headphones, and I was like, oh my God, I finished it. And everyone's like, don't go anywhere. And they went to the back and got everyone from the back, the curators and everybody came out, and they like applauded.
When you're making a painting of a photo, it's a painting of a photo. It's a painting of a still image. And when you're painting from life, there's so much more involved. And it's that X factor, the mystery of you, if I'm painting you, who am I, who are you, what's happening, it's more mysterious. But you gave me these pictures of Alex, and that was the first time I've painted from photos in 30 years. So I would start with the self-portrait, and then at some point I would start referring to those photos and mixing in information about Alex's face into those images. For that final painting of Alex in his most extreme state, I thought that would be a wonderful thing to riff on that Goya Saturn painting. So I was thinking of Saturn eating his son, and I imagined he's eaten the whole child now, and all that's left is this hand sticking out of his mouth. And so I remembered that Anki had these sculptures of hands in her studio. I brought it out and attached it to the mirror so that when I look at the mirror, I'm seeing that hand coming out of my own mouth. So it's so exciting that you've got this image of Alex as the werewolf with the hand coming out of his mouth. Amazing serendipity.
Hombre lobo.
So, I mean, throughout the history of religion and mythology, there are all of these moments where transformation, you know, Daphne turns into a tree, Actaeon turns into a stag, Benjamin is compared to a wolf. But the werewolf, for me, like the wolf man, is Kurt Sidomach's invention, you know, as an early universal classic monster. And Kurt Sidomach's version of the Wolfman comes out of what's happening in World War II and the Nazis. And you know, there was a moment in one of
Adolf Hitler's public addresses where he, late in the war, where he tells the remaining Nazi soldiers to harass their enemies like a gang of werewolves. And that I think Kurt Sidomak was responding to what was the horrors and the atrocities of World War II when he wrote the Wolfman script. That's all rooted in reality, and I feel like that's what makes that film so poignant and so heavy and so beautiful and real, because it's real. So for me, like there's all of this lineage and tradition of transformation and mythology and religion and folk tales, fairy tales, in our dreamscape, in our subconscious, that we're working on, that archetype of transformation. But the Wolfman is specific to the art of film. You know, the Wolfman, I think, is the first great transformer in film. If you're gonna make a movie about transformation, and it's gonna be a monster movie, I love it that it's the werewolf. So Larry is really into Mike Plug, who drew the Werewolf by Night comic and was a great illustrator. And he also did the creature design drawings for John Carpenter's The Thing in 1981. And I told Larry my favorite was Bernie Wrightson. The illustrations that he did for Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf. When I was a kid, those were some of my very favorite drawings. And then his illustrated Frankenstein, I love that book too. When I was a kid, there was an issue of Fangoria magazine, I can't remember what year it was, maybe it was 87 or 88, that had an interview with Bernie Wrightson. The interviewer asks him, what's next? And he says, well, what I would really love to do next is do the creature design for the movie version of Stephen King's The Mist. And that's in like 87 or 88. And then it's like 2006, 2007, when Frank Darabont hires Bernie to actually make the design work for The Mist. And that's incredible because he worked on it. You know, he'd been thinking about it for 20 years. Oh, we got a nice little bird shit going on the window over here.
Yeah, over here too. I've been trying to avoid it this entire time.
Nice in the film.
Yeah.
We went through the car wash last time.
Yeah.
Maybe if I roll the window down?
Yeah. But I've been avoiding it. It's funny, I caught it from the beginning and I've been...
trying to avoid it?
Yeah, this entire time.
Use my head to block it out. Email wasn't a thing when I started graduate school. It didn't exist. And then while I was in graduate school, email became a thing. One of the first people that I emailed was Bernie Wrightson. I don't even remember how I got Bernie Wrightson's email address, but somehow I got it and I started emailing him. And I was getting replies, but the replies were coming from his wife, Liz. So I got into email conversation in the late 90s with Liz Wrightson. And I was sending her photos by email of these werewolf self-portraits that I was working on. And, you know, fanboy gushing about how much I loved Bernie. And when I graduated from graduate school, I got a package in the mail from Bernie Wrightson, and I opened it, and it was a graduation gift. It was one of his window bug design drawings from The Mist. I had an exhibition in 2003. It was my second one-person show in New York City, and it was called, the name of the show was Saturn Set, and there were 8 big paintings in the show, and it was maybe the 10th day of the show. The show ran for 4 weeks, and it was like in the second week of the show. And I was driving in my car, as we're driving now, and my cell phone rang, and I was at a stoplight, and I answered the phone. I'm like, hello? He says, is this John Mitchell? I said, yes, who's this? And he said, this is Robert Altman. And I said, Robert Altman? And there was a pause. I said, Robert Altman, the movie director? And he said, oh, you know my work. He said, listen, I was just in Chelsea, and I saw your show, and I really love your paintings, and I talked to the women that work behind the desk there, and they gave me your name and suggested I call you because I told them that I would love to use your paintings in a film that I'm working on. That was pretty exciting. But then Robert Altman died, and the film never got made. So I came close to having my paintings in a film then,
and it didn't work out, and it's so crazy that I got another chance with Larry. So Martin Scorsese had asked Malcolm Morley if he could use his paintings in the film. And then Malcolm Morley turned him down. And I believe the story is that Malcolm Morley then suggested that Martin Scorsese take a look at this guy, Chuck Conley, who he wound up reaching out to, and then he wound up using Chuck Conley's paintings in the film. And Malcolm said to me, I got the script, I read the script, and I didn't think that that character would make paintings that looked like mine, so it just didn't seem like a good match. And he said, I'm telling you right now, one of these days, some movie director is going to ask you if you will let them use your paintings in a film. And my advice to you right now is to say no, because it could be career limiting. It could hurt your, the way your paintings are perceived. And I don't think of my life as a painter as a career anyway. I just think of it as a life, art life, so who cares? And then there have been lots of other great films where they used painters' paintings, real paintings in the film context, and it worked out fine for the artist. Like Ivan Albright's great painting of Dorian Gray that was used in Albert Lewin's version, which I love so much. Or Francisco Clemente's paintings were used in The Great Expectation movie with Ethan Hawke and Robert De Niro and Gwyneth Paltrow. There are lots of examples of great painters' paintings being used in terrific films. With Larry, this is a very special project because it's so connected to stuff, work that I've been working on for a long time and ideas that I've been working on for a long time, and it just felt very like a very good fit. Like would be, I absolutely would not have said no to that.
You said, this is a drawing that Alex makes in a trailer, and what happens is as much a surprise to him as it is to us, the viewer, that he draws his victim. So you brought these pictures of the actor, and you said, okay, this is what you have to work with. You have 3 minutes. You need to draw with your right hand. I'm left-handed. So we set it up. Jack shot down over my shoulder, and then I just drew it with my right hand. Got into the zone and just did it, and it was really fun. And it reminds me of, there was a moment where I met Jack White, and I hung out with him for a little bit in like the late 90s. And one of the things that I love about Jack is when he's playing his music, the way he's into this idea of interfering with the process. Like he's into playing with a really cheap guitar, for example. If in some way you interfere with your own process so that your facility is interrupted and then try to work through that, you get these amazing things. In Life Lessons, we see Chuck Conley's hands. There's detail shots where you actually see the painter, Chuck Conley, you see his hands painting in Martin Scorsese's film. So I love in this film, for me personally, when I watch the film, I see my own hand making that, and I think, well, nobody's ever going to know it, but I know it.
What better painter from the canon of the history of painting to be a metaphor for the idea of a werewolf than Vincent Van Gogh? He's like this extremely humane guy who wrote these incredible letters to his brother Theo, but he was also a madman.
That's a poster of a Vincent Van Gogh sunflower painting. So I don't know if this is coincidence or if this is intentional, but this movie came out in 1981, and around the same time, I have to look online and find there was a medical paper, a white paper, that came out, and this doctor proposed the idea that Vincent Van Gogh might have had porphyria. So porphyria is a disease. It's called the vampire and werewolf disease. People with porphyria can't go in the sun because it blisters their skin. It makes their skin turn purple. It blisters their skin, but it also makes them go mad, and it makes them behave really erratically. So there's this idea that people who were accused of being vampires and werewolves in centuries ago probably had porphyria. They may have had like an actual disease where the sun made them go mad. Then Vincent Van Gogh being out painting in the sunflower fields would have been the worst possible place for him to be, because he would have been baked in the sun with his porphyria, and he was in the sunflower field painting when he shot himself. So my question is, did John Landis know that? And did he put this image of Vincent Van Gogh painting in the hospital room as an ode to that history? Or is that a coincidence? That's my question.
He went mad and cut his own ear off.
And in Blackout, there are some references to Vincent Van Gogh. There's a moment where Charlie opens his locker in the construction trailer, and there is a reproduction of a painting by Vincent Van Gogh of his shoes inside of his locker. But I know that Larry, in all of his films, that's a repeating motif, focus on a pair of shoes. So I thought it would be fun to look at a Vincent Van Gogh painting. The Yale School Museum is the first art museum in America that was connected to a university. Vincent Van Gogh had an apartment above this cafe, and the guy in white owned the building and was his landlord. But Vincent Van Gogh paid the guy in white rent. And there was a period of time where Van Gogh couldn't pay the rent, so he traded this painting to the guy in white in lieu of rent. So that guy in white owned this painting for a period of time, and then sold it eventually. And he's using this contrasting red-green throughout the painting. Visually, red-green, or metaphorically, being sane, or being mad, being a man, or being a wolf, you know? So this is one of his last paintings.
Wow.
So I went to graduate school at Yale, and I had a 6-year-old son. I was married, I actually got divorced when I was at Yale, but my 6-year-old son saw these werewolf paintings that I was working on in my studio as a graduate student there, and started having nightmares that I would turn into a werewolf and eat him. So one day I was eating my lunch out in the courtyard of the library, and I saw this placard that we're gonna look at. It is this ancient Greek seal that is a talisman for protection from Saturn. And I realized, like, wow, that's what I need in my painting to protect my son from nightmares. So I started trying to make these kind of talismanic paintings to protect my son from nightmares that he was having about me turning into a werewolf and eating him, which is what the myth of Saturn is. Saturn eats his own children. So it was this amazing kind of serendipitous discovery of this ancient Greek seal of Jupiter that I could use in my paintings. And in the movie, there's a scene toward the end of the film where Charlie is in his barn studio at night, and he hears something outside, and he gets up and he's approaching the door, and you can see on the floor behind Charlie, you just see a detail of 2 paintings sitting on the floor that are these glass block window paintings. And those are 2 of a set of 12 paintings that I started working on in 2014. It's 2023 now, so I've been working on this group of 12 paintings for 9 years now. And they're paintings of the glass block window in my studio that looks out onto the garden next door. But there are 16 cells, like 16 glass blocks. And that is a riff on this ancient Greek seal of Jupiter that we'll look at today. I love coming back here. I love this courtyard. I love this library. It reminds me of a good time in my life. You know, going to Yale it was an exciting time. And when I was here, my student job was working in book conservation here at Sterling Memorial Library, putting new bindings on old books that were falling apart. And I love that job. And I always love coming back and revisiting this courtyard and seeing the ancient Greek seal of Jupiter up there, which has meant so much to me. I love revisiting this courtyard and reconnecting with that image. So it is a talisman for protection against melancholia and other bad things. And it adds up to 34 any way you add it up. So if you add the top row, 16, 3, 2, and 13 is 34. Or a row down, like 13, 8, 12, and 1 is 34. Or if you add the four corners, so 16, 13, 1, and 4 is 34. Or if you add the four center squares, 10, 11, 7, and 6 is 34. Or if you add the two top middle ones, which is 3 and 2, and the two middle bottom ones, 15 and 14, that's 34. I love that Larry uses the melancholia drawing in the first scene. It's a great idea to use to make Charlie an artist, a painter, so that we're seeing through his eyes, like his state of mind. And that melancholia image is a perfect, I think, metaphor for the state of mind of the werewolf or Charlie, where he's at. The idea that he's suffering from alcoholism, that his father died recently, that his girlfriend broke up with him, that he would be suffering from melancholia is perfect. So melancholia, that engraving was made in 1514 in the time of the alchemists. And they believed that we were made of four humors: yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, and blood. And that most everyone was out of balance in one way or another. And if you were out of balance in terms of having too much black bile, then that would make you melancholic. And most artists, like Larry Fessenden or myself or you, Rigo, we're thought of living under the sign of Saturn. And in the time of the alchemists, we would have been considered melancholics. I don't think there's any question about Larry. I mean, he has that kind of dark, there's a heavy thing about Larry, and you can feel it in his films. And that's right in line with this idea of melancholy. In alchemy, the ultimate goal of the alchemist is to figure out how to turn lead into gold. And in the time of the alchemists, they believed that for Albert Dürer, Saturday in German would be, I think it's Samstag. But Saturday is Saturn's day, planet Saturn, Saturn's day. And Sunday is the sun's day. Monday is the moon's day. So for the alchemist who wants to turn lead into gold, that's their ultimate goal. They were literally trying to figure out how to do that. And a lot of the alchemists died trying to do that because they were smelting lead in their homes and they were getting lead poisoning, trying to figure out ways to turn it into gold. Somehow, at some point, somebody organized the days of the week so that Saturday turns into Sunday. And the metal of Saturn is lead, and the metal of the sun is gold. So metaphorically, symbolically, Every week when Saturday becomes Sunday, that's lead becoming gold. Every week. Isn't that incredible?
That's like beyond.
So I was talking to you about, like, throughout the course of the history of art and painting and printmaking, this idea of transformation. That's a really good one, right? And that's built into our every week. Saturday becomes Sunday, lead becomes gold. That's transformation. It's a renewing kind of transformation, and it's related to the 4-nail crucifixion. Even formally, visually, what a 4-nail does is it makes it more solid in a way, usually, like, because his legs can go straight down, and a 3-nail you have to cross one leg over the other, so you get this Gothic kind of spiraling thing that goes up more than a 3-nail crucifixion. The 3-nail crucifixion is the divine reward of heaven, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's the Northern European idea. But the Spanish idea and the Southern European idea was always to do a 4-nail crucifixion. Yeah. So 4 is earth. It's east, west, north, and south. It's the 4 seasons. It's the 4 humors. So Albrecht Dürer, who only ever made 3-nail crucifixions, puts 4 nails on the ground here. You see these 4 nails? And there's no doubt in my mind that these 4 nails are a reference to the crucifixion. But he changes the mode from a 3-nail emphasis to a 4-nail emphasis in this image, because this image is a response to the loss of his mother, who suffered. It's about the earthbound suffering of the Christian life. It's, you know, he's not focused at this moment on the heavenly reward. He's focused on the earthbound suffering that he saw his mother go through before she died. Francis Bacon had maybe the messiest studio in the history of the tradition of painting. I don't know if anybody ever had a messier studio than him. And he said, "Chaos for me breeds images." What a great idea for, I mean, that's, you know, Vincent Van Gogh and Francis Bacon, perfect painters who could be considered kind of werewolf painters, you know. And my favorite Francis Bacon quote, "Real pain for my sham friends, champagne for my real friends." So you specifically asked me to think about Francis Bacon when you're working on these paintings. And I also have a friend named Rachel Ostro, terrific painter, but she paints with squeegees. So I was thinking about her paintings too, and Francis Bacon gave me an idea about how to do them. So I went out and bought a bunch of squeegees. I would make the painting quite fast, so it's all wet into wet, and then I would take that squeegee when the painting was done, and I would just go like that, and you would get this great blur effect, a la Rachel Ostro meets Francis Bacon. This is where the camera's sitting. We're looking at the farm stand from here. So can you make the painting from here? And I spent the day working on that painting of the farm stand. And by the way, the people, I don't know if they own the farm stand or if they just work at the farm stand. Throughout the day, they kept coming out and they were bringing me refreshments. You know, they would bring me drinks, but those people were absolutely lovely. And you were describing this stream as a place where his father had taken him fishing. And it was a place that meant a lot to him. I think I said, "So are you asking for a painting of a stream?" And I think your words were, "Well, I certainly wouldn't dissuade you from making a painting of a stream." And I think it was December. Yeah, it was a good reason to go visit my friend Ruth, too. I had been working on these paintings of my friend Ruth Miller. She's 93 years old, one of my favorite painters since I was in college. So I could go visit her in the morning and then head over to the Sheppog River in Washington Depot, Connecticut. And it was wonderful. I would just put on my headphones and bundle up and paint the river.
He once gave me a canvas you'd done of a stream nearby. It's very pastoral. He gave it to me as a gift. He seemed to feel it had some spiritual heft. It belonged in the rectory. It's hanging there still.
Yeah. Yeah, I gave that to him. It's the stream where we used to go fishing. I thought he threw it away.
Your father gave that to me, and it's hanging in the rectory. And Charlie is surprised by that. Wow. He realizes, oh, his father actually cared about his painting, which I can relate to. When my dad expresses any admiration or that he likes one of my paintings, that's always like hits me sideways, and it's always very nice. You asked for painting of the treetops, but just make it up out of your imagination. So what I did was I played all my films from my Larry Fessenden collection and found, and I would pause on all of your shots from Habit and Wendigo, etc., of trees, the treetops, and I would take photos with my iPhone of those film stills, and then I took them over to Ridgewood and I stretched up this 74 by 90 inch canvas, and in a weekend I made this painting, and it was really fun to make. My number one favorite painter of my lifetime was Bryce Martin. But I was channeling Bryce Martin in that painting, really. And then you emailed me, I think the next day, saying it's a little too big. Can you cut it down by like 2 feet on the top and 4 feet on the side? And I thought, oh man, that's gonna really throw off the composition. So you had asked Anki and I to come up and can you guys give Alex a crash course on how to make a painting? So you're gonna pick it up, you're gonna hold it like that. You're gonna come over here, you're gonna dip it down, and you're gonna go like that. And then look what's happening.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Beautiful. You made a beautiful painting, man. That's a beautiful painting. One of the things that I thought kind of on the spur of the moment to tell him about was something that I call the Gamsol cascade. So Gamsol is a solvent. Often at the end of a painting session, what I do is I'll take a big brush, load it up with a lot of Gamsol, and then brush it across the top of the painting and watch this kind of waterfall of Gamsol running down the painting. So I thought that that would be kind of cinematic. So I showed Alex how to do that. I came into the project July 2020 in a cabin in Vermont, on a mountain in Rupert, Vermont, withdrawing those nature drawings. And then in 2023, I guess, late 2023, when the film screened in Canada, we had gone out to a bar after and were enjoying a few beverages. And I said, oh, Larry, it's so great. I love this film so much. And you said, yeah, John, but it's not finished. And I said, what do you mean it's not finished? You said, I want the animation to be a little longer. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? And you said, I think that means that you need to make a lot of drawings. And we need them 2 months from now. And I was like, how many drawings are you thinking? You're like, I don't know, 170 or so. And I just thought, oh my God, here we go. And for 77 days, I think it was, I was just chained to my drawing desk. And I loved it. Remnant paintings, like in a way, like condensation of a process. And now the main painting is gone, so these paintings you can't work on them anymore because there's no source now, And that's a weird feeling. I think he's hoping to bring a finished cut out in January or February. So the version that screens in October may or may not have this animation depending on how fast I can make it.
October is tomorrow.
I know. Yeah. But this is going to be a lot of work to do, 180 drawings. Right. And then we might get to the end of it and Larry might go, you know what, we should have done it with this way. You know what I mean? Like, oh shit. Yeah. So I think it's going to be cool. Yeah. I think the black and white.
They like freeze dry you and like not supposed to. Yeah. Which is.
That's finished. Because the rule is it has to happen in an hour. Whatever it looks like at the end of the hour, that's it. Here's another painting of me.
Oh wow, Glenn.
Glenn can do it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna keep doing this project until we have, enough of these to do a show. Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be a nightmare for whoever does it.
I went to the art supply store and got a wafer light board. So it's a very thin, it's almost like an iPad, but it's a light table. But then I built this frame for it so that I can put a drawing inside of it and trap it with the image underneath. So it's as a kind of registration. There's a great quote by Vincent in one of his letters to his brother where he says, "Pens are like people. The best ones are free, and the expensive kinds are useless." There was bamboo growing all around where he lived, so he would just go out and cut a stalk of bamboo, and then he would cut it down to like the length of a pen and sharpen it, and cut a slit in the sharp point and make a pen out of it. And he would draw with these bamboo reed pens.
It's incredible.
And this is a bamboo reed pen drawing.
Wow.
So when I was working on the animation sequence for the film, I was drawing with a reed pen, specifically in reference to Vincent Van Gogh.
Charlie says, I had this sensation that I was separating from myself. So it gave me the idea to make it so that there are traces of, so you make a drawing, he's in this position, then you make the next drawing, he's in a new position, but you draw the former position, and then you make the third drawing and you draw the two former positions in lighter ink, and you just keep doing that so that when he says that line, you're actually showing that in the animation. So really I should focus down here maybe.
That's
all
what
of
I
these transformation ones.
Exactly.
Okay.
These and then to the end.
To the werewolves, yeah.
Yes.
All of these are probably the most important ones.
I think John will always put in 100%. Everything that he does is impeccable and detailed, and he always has an idea of what he wants to do, and he will execute it to the T. But there's also a lot of freedom and experimenting with this project, because obviously I think Larry is guiding a little bit of his vision as well. So I think it's a really cool collaboration.
Yeah, I think I don't like this one as much as this one. What do you think?
Well, I don't either, but there are no redos.
Yeah.
I do whatever, but I do find, look at the fur.
This is much better.
It's
Well, I mean,
so cool.
I'm figuring it out as I'm doing it. I'm
I know,
learning.
but that's
And
why
I'm
it's
getting richer and better.
This is also a fun thing to learn. Is in film there's a romanticizing about filming in order.
Yes.
And I basically fall into that same mindset, because you're like, oh, and we're going to discover, and you're going to build on your character and all this sort of thing. But there's something also cool to remember about jumping around, because suddenly scene 4 is a little rough because that's where you started, and then you later on, but then scene 1 you do 3 weeks in, and you're like, we fucking had our shit together.
Yeah.
So similarly, it's fun to jump around. That's
Yeah.
why I'm very comfortable when I say I need 80 through 90 or whatever.
You knew that before knew that before I did. Because,
I was discovering it also.
you
But it's also me just wanting to hit certain highlights of the transition.
Yeah. I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop. I want to just keep doing it.
I want you to,
I have a feeling I'm going to run out of things to draw and be like, oh no, it's over. Like when you're reading a really good book and you don't want it to end.
Yeah.
You're like, no, please don't end.
Yeah, well, that's why God invented television, because those shows never end. It's like there's a new season.
When I was a student here, I was making these werewolf self-portraits. And if somebody had told me then 24 years ago that I would be working on a werewolf film now with Larry Fessenden, making 135 drawings of a guy transforming into a werewolf for an animated sequence for the film, I wouldn't have believed them.
I didn't put anything in, but
Okay.
there's a lot going on in the sound, and also
It's
more
like almost a
importantly,
synesthesia that I had, maybe.
but it's also I placed it where he said a fractured dream, and it's like,
Yes.
I think that's what it was.
Yes.
So this is the thing about it's the simpatico of image to sound to animation, and I also what I do is I remove that so I have it actually go.
Yes.
So it kind of goes.
I knew you would.
Yeah, of course.
I figured I'll just make these splash drawings,
So,
and then he's going to play with them and cut
I'd
them
say
out.
at the end of the night, just do. I haven't even worked with number 1.
This full moon was so big, so bright, so potent, and I had this sensation that I was separating from myself, transforming into something else. It was like this crazy, fractured dream.
I've been a fan of you for, since 1999 when I first saw Habit. And then 23 years later, we had made a film together, and it was amazing. It was incredible. It was such a fun experience.
All right. This is the painter.
It's like we're on the subway together.
Yeah, we are.
And you're
we're going
this-
somewhere quick.
And you've got the spreader thing that they do on the subway. He's got his legs
exactly.
taking up the whole subway seat.
John, thank you, sir.
Thank you,
It's been
Larry.
a great pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun.
All right, that's sweet. Okay, boys, we're
right.
done.
In my recollection, you said, what's the money arrangement? Or like how and I was like, no money. I'm not gonna do this for money. I was like, you make a film about me and that'll be a fair trade. And you're like, great, done. And that was it, right? Am I right?
No, you had another thing.
Oh,
Is that you wanted to be in the movie.
Oh, and not only me, but Anki too.
Hope you are a werewolf and not a serial killer, because that stuff, that is nasty.